The official statement from Buckingham Palace was a masterclass in lethal minimalism. It contained just 4 sentences, a scant handful of words chosen to acknowledge a crisis while revealing precisely nothing. Prince William, the statement confirmed, was facing a health challenge that required medical attention and would be stepping back from immediate public duties. The language was sterile, polished to a dull sheen by teams of communications experts and constitutional lawyers. It was designed to calm, to placate, to project an image of controlled, dignified difficulty. But in the void it deliberately created, in the cavernous silence between those official lines, a far more terrifying truth began to scream. This was not a routine announcement about a strained back or a case of severe influenza. This was the first faint tremor of a seismic event that had already shattered the private world of the future king and queen. The real story, locked behind palace gates and sworn oaths of secrecy, was one of betrayal so intimate and an attack so sophisticated that it threatened not just a man's health, but the very integrity of the institution he was born to lead. It was a story that began not with a dramatic collapse, but with a quiet, personal unraveling, the terrifying discovery that one's own mind could no longer be trusted. The morning it started was utterly ordinary. In the family kitchen at Adelaide Cottage, the day dawned with the familiar, comforting chaos of children. Prince George was negotiating the complexities of a history assignment. Princess Charlotte was animatedly debating outfit choices for an upcoming school event. Prince Louis, in the way of youngest children everywhere, was single-mindedly championing the urgent necessity of a pet rabbit. Prince William moved through this domestic scene with the ease of routine, drinking his coffee, engaging with each child, and sharing a quiet moment with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. He scanned his schedule on his phone, a visit to a veterans organization in South London, before departing with a final kiss. To every observer, from his family to his protection officers, he was simply William, a father, a husband, a prince undertaking his duty. The engagement itself was flawless. He arrived on time, his handshake firm, his attention focused. He listened to veterans' stories with genuine empathy, delivered brief but heartfelt remarks on the importance of supporting those who served, and posed for photographs with a warm, approachable smile. His private secretary's notes from the event recorded nothing unusual. It was, by all external metrics, a perfectly executed royal appearance. The catastrophe was invisible and it was already complete. The first crack in reality appeared in the comforting familiarity of his own home. Returning to Catherine that afternoon, William asked about lunch plans. The look she gave him was not one of playfulness, but of profound confusion. They had already eaten lunch, she reminded him gently, together in the garden. Just an hour ago. He had described the veterans he met, the conversations they'd shared. William's initial reaction was a dismissive laugh, a presumption that she was teasing. But her expression remained solemn, concerned. A cold, unfamiliar dread began to pool in his stomach. He had no memory of returning home at noon. No memory of the garden, the sandwiches, the conversation. His last clear recollection was finishing breakfast and getting into his car. The entire, meticulously documented public engagement, the handshakes, the speeches, the photographs had been erased from his conscious mind. It was as if he had blacked out while remaining fully functional, a passenger in his own body. Catherine, ever the steadying force, offered the rational explanation: exhaustion, the relentless pressure of his role. He clung to this hope, this simple, understandable cause, but in his heart, he knew the truth. This was not fatigue. This was a malfunction. And it was the most frightening thing he had ever experienced. The rationalization lasted only 3 days. Then, another block of time vanished, a 6-hour afternoon completely lost. He remembered sitting down for lunch, and his next conscious moment was the dinner table being set. The evening light fading. Catherine, her concern now hardening into fear, detailed the afternoon he could not recall, playing with the children in the garden, helping Louis with his reading, reviewing paperwork in his study. He had been present, engaged, and seemingly himself. But to William, it was a report on a stranger's life. He began a private, desperate journal, a secret log of the voids in his memory. The episodes became more frequent, more audacious in their theft. The most terrifying loss was nearly a full day. He went to bed one night, and his next coherent memory was of sitting at a formal dinner the following evening. A glass of wine in his hand, a conversation mid-flow around him. He had to subtly extract from Catherine what day it was, what the event was for. The horror was no longer just the loss of memory, but the realization that during these blank periods, he was living a full, complex life. He was making decisions, interacting with people, and fulfilling obligations as the Prince of Wales, all while being utterly absent from himself. Catherine transformed into his archivist, his anchor, and his mirror. constantly reflecting back the man he had been just hours before. A man he could no longer remember being. After 6 weeks of this silent, escalating nightmare, the medical process began. It was thorough, intrusive, and ultimately futile. World-class specialists were consulted in strictest confidence. Batteries of tests were run. Brain scans searched for tumors, strokes, any physical abnormality. They returned pristine, showing a healthy, normal brain. Blood tests looked for hormonal imbalances, vitamin deficiencies, rare diseases. Everything was unremarkable. The conclusion from the physical side was both a relief and a new terror. There was nothing medically wrong with him. This led to the psychiatric evaluation. Kind, brilliant minds explored the trauma of his childhood, the perennial, crushing weight of his destiny, the possibility of a dissociative disorder triggered by unimaginable pressure. William submitted to the therapy, digging into the grief for his mother, the complexities of his relationship with the crown, the fears he held for his own family. The psychiatrists were compassionate but perplexed. His symptoms did not align neatly with any textbook case. A profound and unsettling sense of wrongness permeated the diagnosis. Meanwhile, the palace machinery was grinding into a different kind of anxiety. William's modified schedule canceled engagements. Withdrawn appearances was generating press speculation. Whispers of a serious, hidden illness began to circulate. The public narrative was slipping out of control, and the private truth remained a maddening mystery. It was Catherine, operating on a wire of spousal instinct and sheer desperation, who broke the diagnostic deadlock. In a private conversation with a friend connected to medical research, a casual mention was made of neurotoxins, compounds that could affect cognitive function. Used in controlled laboratory settings, this offhand comment ignited a spark. Bypassing the official channels that had failed them, Catherine independently contacted a specialized toxicology laboratory, renowned for detecting the undetectable. She sent them samples, William's blood, his hair, even archived samples from his initial tests. The process was costly and uncertain, but cost and certainty were no longer considerations. For 2 agonizing weeks, they waited. When the report arrived, Catherine read it alone. The clinical language could not dilute its horrific impact. William's system tested positive for multiple synthetic compounds, classified as experimental cognitive disruptors. These were not naturally occurring substances. They were engineered, designed specifically to interfere with neural pathways related to memory formation and retrieval. The levels indicated not a single exposure, but a regimen of ongoing administration over many weeks. The report stated plainly what this meant. The symptoms William exhibited, the selective memory loss, the gaps in recall while maintaining function, were a direct, textbook result of exposure to these chemicals. This was not an illness. It was not stress. It was not a psychological break. It was poisoning. The world in that moment divided into a before and an after. Catherine's next actions were governed by a cold, clear fury. She did not go to palace officials. She did not follow protocol. She took the report directly to the one person whose loyalty was beyond doubt, and whose power to act was absolute, the head of William's personal security detail, a man who had protected the family for decades. She placed the pages in his hands and watched as his professional composure fractured, replaced by a storm of outrage and horror. "This is a deliberate act," he said, the words barely more than a whisper. "Someone with access has been poisoning him with his authority." A covert, cell-like investigation was launched. A team of 3, vetted for absolute discretion and skills in intelligence and forensic accounting, began work in total secrecy. Their task was to cross-reference the timeline of William's memory episodes, with his precise movements, his meals, his drinks, and the people who had access to them. The pattern emerged with chilling speed. The episodes clustered around specific locations and, more tellingly, around a revolving group of approximately 20 individuals who handled his sustenance aides, secretaries, catering staff. One name, when subjected to financial scrutiny, glowed like a neon sign: an assistant private secretary, a 7-year veteran of William's household. His finances revealed a trail of substantial, unexplained deposits into layered offshore accounts. The source, once unpicked from its nest of shell companies, was a private equity firm with ties to a network of wealthy, influential traditionalists who had been publicly critical of William's modernizing stance on issues, from climate action to mental health advocacy. The motive was nakedly political. This was not a personal grudge. It was a preemptive strike against a future king's ideology. The confrontation was a clinical, devastating extraction of truth. The assistant secretary, summoned under a false pretext, walked into a room containing the security chief, the investigators, and the damning evidence of his financial treason and the toxicology report. His denial was brief, brittle. When confronted with the scientific proof of what the compounds did, and the evidence linking him to their procurement, through an acquaintance in pharmaceutical research, his resolve shattered. He confessed. He detailed how intermediaries, representing concerned parties worried about the monarchy's direction, had approached him. They offered life-altering wealth in exchange for a simple, seemingly harmless task to administer substances that would cause temporary confusion, to make the prince appear unfocused, unreliable. He described slipping droplets into coffee, mixing powders into water bottles, contaminating food during working lunches. He claimed he never understood the full, malicious scope. He believed he was merely clouding judgment, not erasing a man's mind. But his ignorance was irrelevant. He had been the instrument of a profound violation. The briefing for William was the most difficult moment of the entire ordeal. Catherine sat beside him, her hand in his, as the security chief laid out the cold, hard architecture of the betrayal, the identity of the poisoner, the financial motive, the political network behind it. William listened in a silence so profound it felt like a physical entity. The fear and confusion of the past months were now reframed as facets of a calculated assault. His question, when it came, was low and gut-wrenching. During the times I cannot remember. What did I do? Was I controlled? Did I agree to things? The answer was the final layer of the nightmare. Forensic reconstruction showed that during his chemically induced blackouts, William had not been a zombie. He had been a fully operational prince. He held meetings. He had conversations. He made decisions. The investigation now had to pivot to a new, urgent question: what had been done to him? And what had been done through him during those vulnerable hours? The conspiracy had not just sought to discredit. It had sought to manipulate, to use the prince's own authority against his future self. The palace now faced an impossible dilemma. The full truth of politically motivated poisoning of the heir to the throne, potentially involving manipulated decisions, was a threat to national stability. Revealing it would expose catastrophic security failures, invite copycat attacks, and paint William as a compromised figure. Yet, burying it entirely felt like a second betrayal. After tortuous consultation between the king, William, and the highest echelons of government and security, a brutal compromise was reached. The public would be told of a health issue, treated and now in recovery. The specific nature of the attack, the political motive, the depth of the betrayal, these would remain locked in the highest security vaults. William argued passionately for transparency, but was ultimately overruled. The institution, it was decided, had to be protected, even from the truth. The first anodyne statement was the bitter fruit of that decision. William's physical recovery was a grueling process of detoxification. The treatments were harsh, leaving him nauseated and exhausted. Catherine became his absolute guardian, tasting his food, vetting every person who came near him, her love manifesting as a protective ferocity that bordered on siege mentality. As the chemicals cleared, a strange and painful phenomenon began: involuntary memory flashes. Shards of his lost time returned, not as narratives but as sensory fragments, the smell of a room, the tension in a conversation, the weight of a pen in his hand. He kept a notebook, diligently recording these ghostly echoes, trying to assemble a puzzle from pieces that refused to fit. The final, definitive validation of the plot's ambition came when a conspirator, seeking leniency, offered full cooperation. He revealed the ultimate goal during William's compromised states. They had presented him with policy frameworks and commitments, securing his agreement and his signature on documents that would bind his future reign to their traditionalist agenda. They had intended to use these signed pledges later as political leverage, either to force his compliance or to publicly expose his hypocrisy if he diverged. Seeing his own signature on documents committing him to a vision he opposed was a visceral shock. A theft of his agency more complete than the theft of his memory. The pressure for a more truthful disclosure became unbearable. The minimal statement was fueling wilder speculation. Finally, months after the first incident, a second, more detailed statement was released. It confirmed the poisoning, the arrest of a household member, and William's full recovery, while still withholding the most politically explosive details. The global reaction was instantaneous and immense. Outrage, sympathy, and a fierce protective instinct towards William and his family flooded the media. His first carefully managed public appearance was a moment of immense gravity. The man who waved to the crowd was the same prince, yet irrevocably changed. The experience had sanded away a layer of easy trust, revealing a core of tempered steel. His gaze was warmer, yet wiser. His smile genuine, yet no longer naive. He had looked into the abyss of betrayal and understood the true cost of his birthright. In a deliberate act of defiance, he plunged back into his work with renewed vigor, championing his causes not in spite of the attack, but because of it. If they sought to silence his voice on climate or mental health, he would raise it louder. The legacy of the scandal is a permanent scar upon the monarchy's operations and the family's private world. Security protocols were entirely rewritten, rooted in a new paradigm of paranoia as necessity. Trust is now a luxury granted only after exhaustive verification. For William and Catherine, the episode forged an unbreakable alliance. But it also instilled a perpetual, low-grade vigilance. The sound of a cup being placed on a saucer, the offer of a glass of water, these simple acts now carry an echo of past danger. The conspiracy revealed a terrifying modern vulnerability in the 21st century. The most potent threats to power may not come from foreign armies or raging mobs, but from colorless, odorless liquids slipped into a drink by a smiling, trusted face. The story that began with a forgotten lunch is ultimately a stark parable about the monarchy. In a new age, a reminder that the crown's greatest battles are often fought not in the public square, but in the silent, shadowed corridors of trust, where the weapons are chemistry, betrayal, and the fragile, sacred architecture of a human mind.